Hi, everybody, and welcome to episode 10 of the Lunar Temple podcast. So, this is the first time that I am recording video to go along with this podcast episode. And the reason that I'm doing this is so that I can also release these episodes over on my YouTube channel. So, I've sort of neglected, not on purpose, but neglected my YouTube channel a little bit. Just because there's just not always the time for tending everything. And I realized the other day I logged in to get a link for something, and there's quite a lot of I'm very grateful for, like, a lot of subscribers. And yeah, I just realized that I haven't really connected with my YouTube people recently. So my intention moving forward is to be, yeah, just sharing a lot more content with you, as well as carrying on with the podcast as well. So we are exploring all things autumn in this episode, and particularly looking at the autumn equinox, which took place last Friday. So I'm recording this episode on the 26th of September. And we had the new moon in Libra last night, in UK time. I think it was around 10 o'clock last night. So it feels like a really nice day to be recording this. It's Monday, so it's Moon Day, and Monday has become my day off. So my day to be able to work on my work, my content, my magic. So it's been a really nice addition, having the Mondays off. So just things have shifted with my husband's work, and so yes, I'm really excited to have moon days back. They always used to be my days off before I had little Orla, and then obviously there's not really a day off anymore when you're the one that's staying at home, looking after the little ones. But yeah, it's really nice. So my husband has Orla on a Monday, and I can get stuck in to sharing all these lovely things with you. So we are, yeah, we're at the end of this month, aren't we? I personally don't know what happened to September. I was looking at my diary and thinking, oh my goodness, it's October this week, so Saturday. And yeah, I just couldn't tell you where the month has gone. I know I've done things, but it just seems to go really quickly. And actually, when I think about it, I think September always goes really fast. And it also always feels like a very sudden transition into autumn. Like there's just this sudden feeling of cold air and heating needing to be turned on, which I know we're all probably really reluctant to do with the cost of living. But we've made a decision today to just turn it on, just gently, because it's getting cold now, and the nights are drawing in. And yeah, in October really we'll kind of feel that shift even further, as we make our way towards Samhain and the start of winter. So in terms of the Celtic wheel of the year, autumn equinox is actually mid autumn. So there's a lot of confusion around this time of year, and none of it is right or wrong. There's just lots of different expressions of the starts of seasons. So Libra, in terms of the astrological calendar, initiates autumn. So many people will associate a Libra new moon or Libra season with the beginning of autumn. With the Celtic wheel of the year, autumn actually begins with Lunar, which is August 1st. And I was talking to my parents about this the other day. Actually, we were talking about seasons and what feels right for us. And we all agreed actually that really resonates with us, that we really feel that autumn begins, maybe very subtly, but in August. And then really when you're getting to the equinox, it is middle autumn. That makes sense in terms of the sun, of course, because the equinox is that moment of balance. It's that point where the light and the dark are equal, the day and the night. And then of course it's that tipping point. So from that moment onwards, we're going to have more night than day, more dark than light. But yes, I think in terms of perhaps more of a generalized view, people will associate the autumn equinox and Libra season with the start of autumn, and perhaps that is contributing to that feeling that autumn arrives very quickly, because actually by the time we're saying autumn is starting, it really has gotten underway. The weather has shifted, the days are shortening. So however you welcome in this season, I think we can all agree that autumn is here. And we have that sense of change in the air. So Libra is it's a cardinal sign, so it begins, it initiates, it starts, and as I said, with the astrological calendar, it is starting a new season. It's starting a new triplet of star signs. So we've got Libra, that cardinal energy, and then that moves into Scorpio, which is mutable. And then, sorry, it is fixed. Scorpio is a fixed sign. And then moving into to Sagittarius, which closes off that triplet. So Libra is an air sign, and I think that really kind of connects with this time of year, because when we look at the Ayurveda teachings, this is the time where we start to move, particularly end of September into October, is that movement into Vata season. So from Pitta season, from that summer, from that hot and that dry, to then moving into Vata, which is a lot of air and a lot of ether. And we can feel this, can't we? I think in the weather, there tends to be a lot of wind, there tends to be a lot of cold air, biting winds, and all of that can move through our body and make us feel a little bit unsettled. So the wind and the air element have a really interesting relationship with our nervous system. And depending on how much air that you have in your own personal chart, we may feel that more strongly and feel more sensitive to that. So there can be a feeling in autumn of just feeling a little bit unsettled. And I think that's why it's so important to tend to our hearth and our home and really feel that sense of coming back to our center. Really making some time and space to think about what your needs and requirements are for this season. It's that time of year where we naturally start to pick up on the colds and the viruses that are going around. So I've already had something that Orla gave to me a couple of weeks ago. So it's a time to really think about protecting our energy, thinking about what our bandwidth is for the season. Do we need to start scaling back a little bit more? So it's interesting, this shift from our summer self into our autumn self, because our summer self can really commit to lots of things because we have the energy, we have the weather, we have the daylight. And it's interesting to have a little bit of a recalibrate conversation with yourself about, perhaps I'm not able to sustain the amount that I was doing in summer, even if that just means the amount we were socializing over the summer months, because I just don't have the same energetic bandwidth. And that is only going to change more and more the closer that we get to the winter as well. So Libra, really, this Libra new moon, it's ruled by Venus, which is the sign that the planet, that is love and abundance and beauty and pleasure. And so this can really invite us into a sense of taking care of ourselves. So yeah, asking what you need, how are you feeling at the moment? You know, how has the summer been for you? you know, maybe it's actually not been that great. Maybe there's been a lot of sadness, maybe there's been a lot of difficulty, and there might be some elements of self-care now that need to allow space and time for you to process and heal whatever has been going on for you. I mean, certainly in the world there is heaviness, isn't there? There is consistent devastating news, awful conflict, you know, awful things happening, and a lot of fear and uncertainty over the future. And all of that is moving through us also, that we need to process, we need to heal those things as well. So self-care, I think, is really important for the autumn and the winter, and Libra really helps us to connect with that. It's a sign of harmony and balance and peace. It's a sign of fairness and justness as well. So as well as us taking care of ourselves, setting our own boundaries, Libra is a sign that is very, very interested in what is going on in the world, what is happening in the collective, and it really invites us to lend our voice to things that are not right, injustices, unfairnesses, wrongs. So things that where we can lend our voice to, be an advocate, you know, be an ally. So Libra, it's those two things. It's being able to love and care and tend to ourselves and our own needs, but also having that vision of taking care and being concerned and connected with the collective as well. The scales of balance, yes. And only we know where we're at right now if we are getting to that point of an empty cup. You know, we need to refill, we need to tend to ourselves so that we have excess to give to others. And sometimes we know we're in a space where we can, you know, we feel strong and we feel centered and we feel anchored, and we're able to do more. So balance is the key for autumn, for equinox, and for Libra as well. So I wanted to read something from the Autumn Anthology. So those of you that are watching me, it's this book here. So I've got all of these. There's a set of 4 for each of the seasons. So it's edited by Melissa Harrison, and it's a collection of writings about, well, this one is about autumn, but obviously each of them are to do with their respective seasons. They're really, really worthwhile getting and just dipping in and out of as you move through the season. So this is from page 58. So autumn is an adventure, a season of transformation, and a time to prepare for the long winter ahead. It is 1,000 leaves falling to the ground and nourishing the soil beneath. It is heavy rainfalls that catch you off guard and drive you to shelter. It is the refreshing winds that sweep the haze of summer away. It is the calm before the storm. More than that, though, autumn is a celebration of senses, of new experiences for your eyes, ears, tongue, skin, and nose. It rouses your consciousness after the calming effects of summer. Autumn isn't the season of decay or death, but one of wealth and renewal. It is the changing landscape, the subtle anticipation of winter. Autumn is to be enjoyed. So I love that. And I love that change in perception, you know, that, I mean, we know, of course, it is about death and decay. That is what's happening in the natural world. But I love this idea of it also being renewing, and there being an abundance and a wealth there, and a time to really enjoy. So in terms of the archetypes, the feminine archetypes that we can associate with the seasons, we are shifting as we move into autumn from the mother or creatrix archetype of the summer into the enchantress phase, the wild woman, the wise woman. the witch. So this really becomes a powerful time to give space and energy to your magic, your magical life, your magical self. This is a really powerful time to retreat in if you can, spend more time with yourself, with your intuition. And I love to try and clear as much space as I can towards the end of autumn into winter for my own study, where I start to think I want to try and get as much of my work done end of summer, early autumn, so that I can really embrace the archetypes of the enchantress and then into the crone. And of course, it's hard in these modern times because our modern Western calendars do not align with the seasonal ones, and we're never really given the opportunity to slow down. And as we approach winter, the emphasis should be on slowing down, on resting, and really connecting with the dark. This would have been a time of storytelling. The work would have been done. By the time you get to Samhain, there would have been no more work to do on, agriculturally in the farms, on the land. So it would have been a time of community, of storytelling, of connecting to the mysteries, connecting to the darkness, and resting. And then the work would begin again at Imbolc, that beginning of springtime. So we don't have that anymore. In some weird way, we become busier in winter. That lead up to the festive season can be overwhelming. Also, with the school year beginning in September, there's an energy and a momentum there. But this, I always find confusing energy of a new year, even though we're actually going into the waning year, the waning of the year. So there's a lot of conflicting energy. It can be difficult to navigate. So we have to do what we can with what we have and accept that we live in a system that doesn't honor these sacred cycles. So try not to be disheartened and try not to be frustrated if you can't do it all. If you think I just want to not work at all through winter, we have to be realistic about the systems and the structures that we live within, but we try and create a little bit more space where you can, try and add a little bit more magic in where you can. And as I said, that's something in my personal work that I try to do, just try and do less of the bulk of my work in the winter, and use it as a time for me to actually study, do my own immersions in things. So last year I did Beth Kempton's Winter Writing Sanctuary, which was just glorious. I couldn't do it 100% because we have well, she was a baby then, but toddler now. But I did what I could and I really enjoyed it. So that's just something to think about as we are moving towards the winter, is how could you step back, slow down, retreat a little bit more, and make more time for your inner enchantress, your inner witch. So it's a really beautiful archetype, because what happens is when we move from the creatrix of summer, the summer is that time to really be outward. It's perhaps a time of responsibility. We're doing a lot with our work, we're doing a lot with our social life. There's a sense of kind of getting as much out of the days as possible. It's busy. There's holidays, there's festivals, there's all sorts of things. With the enchantress autumn phase, it is that sense of returning back to the hearth, to the home, and alchemizing all the experiences of the year and kind of turning them round in your cauldron and making magic with them. So autumn is a really nice time to be very reflective. So how has this year been? What have you learned? What has surprised you? What experiences have really lit you up? What have you learned is absolutely not okay? When you think, what, this pattern of behavior, your own or other people's, this is something I don't want to to have anymore in my life. Maybe your relationships have changed. Maybe what you want from your work life has changed. So it's a time that lends itself for real, like, deep reflection. And the more that you can retreat inwards and sit with yourself and ask yourself these questions, the more insight that you're going to get. And then what we want then from the winter is our crone self to then be almost kind of stirring that cauldron gently and slowly, and connecting with the dream space and connecting with our ancestors, and using the winter to fill your creative cup back up, to receive insights from the other world, from your time listening to stories, or watching magical films, or whatever it is that you do. So winter actually is incredibly potent for magic and for connection to your insight, to your ancestors, to your guides, to your deities. And then all of that then can create growth in the spring. Yeah, so it's really interesting when you look at what is happening in the natural world. There is no true death. Yeah, so it looks as if autumn is a death, and of course there is decay, but it is all being recycled. It is all energy transforming. And we can do the same thing in our life, where we think, this is the stuff that has worked, this is the stuff that hasn't worked. How is that being broken down and recycled and transformed into something else? So even though there's this sense of death, really it's transformation. And that is what nature teaches us, that it is a cycle, and that there is no true death. It is just a change. And when one thing is dying, or appearing to die, a seed has been released, a fruit has been released with a seed within, and that seed lies under the soil and it's dormant. And there is a sense of dormancy in winter, but what's actually happening is an intake of nutrients and then a growing of roots. So the first thing a seed does is grows down, and before it comes up and bursts through the soil. So if you could have a word to carry with you through the autumn and winter, roots. Roots is a really good one. Thinking about that, like, what are your roots? What is going to earth and ground and anchor you as you begin to awaken again in the spring next year? Yeah, what nutrients and nourishment do you need to be drinking in over these colder, darker months, that is then going to transform into new growth, new ideas, new creations next year? Yeah, but rest, that dormant period, is really important, and that is what we lack in these modern times. We do not make time for it, even in the lunar cycle. And I know I've talked about this many times, but we still, even as the lunar living is becoming so much is becoming so popular, but it's still missed out the dark moon. It's just not there. We don't honor this phase, and we go straight to the new moon. And there isn't that sense of honoring lunar winter, that point in the cycle where we do nothing, where we rest, where we reflect, where we receive insight and wisdom that we have gained from that month. And it's an interesting pattern when we look at how patriarchy kind of infiltrates even into our connection with the lunar cycle, that we are so focused on the new moon. Must set a new intention, got to get this new goal, got to do this. And then we miss all the other steps, and it's okay also if you don't have a new moon intention. We don't always have to be actioning and driving forward. Perhaps it's an intention. This is why I like working with the triples in the star signs. It could just be one intention initiated with a cardinal sign that then moves for a few months. It could be one intention for the year. It doesn't matter. But try and notice in your own practice the lack the disconnect between the restful parts of the cycles. So that can be winter, that can be the dark moon. If you're menstruating, this will be the menstrual phase of the cycle. So if we just completely ignore that and we just carry on without resting, without honoring and acknowledging the bleed. And in terms of the life cycle, it is just this lack of value for the crone, the elder, that part of us that shows up every month and every year. And then, of course, in our own life cycle too. So it's interesting as we move through the autumn and winter to just pay attention to your own relationship to rest, to the death process, to the endings, to how we relate to change. Is change really difficult for us? That will help us to understand our relationship to death, our understanding of death, life, rebirth, these amazing magical cycles of life. And that's what the enchantress can really help with as well, or the witch or the wild woman, however you connect with that archetype. She really understands these cycles. And we can explore that even further when we get to Samhain as well, because Samhain is the death of the year. It is liminal space. It is the veil thinning. It's a time to really look at these concepts and really understand how we feel about them. The other thing that I really love in terms of mythology with the autumn equinox is it is the descent of Persephone into the underworld. So I think I've spoken many, many times, in my teachings, on the podcast, perhaps, in my women's circles. But I over many years of researching and reclaiming and my own personal relationship to the story of Persephone, I don't connect with the story of Persephone being abducted and her being kind of forced into the underworld. There's lots of research about her story, her original story, her story, and how it was changed and manipulated into this more patriarchal telling of the story. And so my relationship to the Persephone myth is that she chose to go to the underworld, and she descends into the dark and into the mysteries, and she is taught in the underworld by Hecate, so the queen of witches, and she uses her time in the underworld to learn, to explore the mysteries, the magic, and then she returns again at the spring equinox as in her maiden self as Kore. So I love this myth at this time of year, and this idea ourself of descending into the underworld and looking at the dark, looking at our own shadows. And we're going to have a lot of opportunities to do that this year, this end of the year, because we are soon going to be in eclipse season. To the end of October, we have a new moon solar eclipse in Scorpio, followed by a lunar eclipse in November. And so eclipse seasons are always that time to look at our shadows, look at our triggers, look at the unhealed parts of ourselves. And that is an underworld journey, where we make a lot of time and space to really look at what needs healing, what needs transforming, what needs releasing, and then to be reborn, to rise again in our own maiden form. So I love that story at this time of year. I also love the story of Bridget and the Kaliak and their relationship in some of the Scottish and Irish mythology, where the Kaliak is said to return at Samhain and reign over the winter months, and then Bridget is triumphant once again in spring. At Imbolc, she returns There's also lots of ideas where they're actually the same, they're just different faces, or other ones where they're kind of warring against each other. And then there's also the oak and the holly king in Celtic mythology as well. And again, it's that battle between the light and the dark, the light half of the year and the dark half of the year. So autumn equinox lends itself to so many of these myths that are very similar. This idea of descending and then returning, rising again in spring. So we ourselves, as I said, we can relate to these months in the same way, where we think, yeah, okay, how can I just let go a little bit of the busyness of summer, some of those commitments, some of that you have that social timetable, and get this idea, this sense of descending and moving down into the underworld. So I'm actually going to be releasing the next couple of days a free course to work with Persephone. So if anyone who's interested, if you haven't really connected with her before, or you're not familiar with the reclaimed version of her story, it's just a really sweet little course where you get to do a meditation to meet her in her dark maiden form, in her queen of the underworld form. Take a journey to meet her in meditation, and then there'll just be lots of nice resources that you can connect with as well. So I will be releasing that soon, so I'll let you know about that. And there's also my autumn equinox course as well, if you would like to join in with that. So it's a self-study one, and it's just I love this course. I'm really proud of it. I really enjoyed putting it together, because it's just lots of juicy autumn stuff that you can enjoy. So there's seasonal yoga in there. It's a really gentle, earthy, restorative practice. There's like journaling prompts, a journaling sheet. There's some of my favorite autumn recipes, a really nice autumn meditation to welcome in the waning of the year. And then there's some history in there as well, just about this time of year and how the autumn equinox was honoured. So it's another one of those with the wheel of the year. So we see this time of year being referred to as Marbon a lot, so Mabon. But it is interesting to know that or helpful to know that name it's not an ancient name for the autumn equinox. So Marbon is a Welsh god. He himself is ancient. He is from very old Welsh mythology, but he is not associated really with the autumn equinox. But when the wheel of the year was sort of being represented, there were a couple of them names were chosen for a few points on the wheel of the year that made sense to the people kind of repackaging the wheel of the year, but it isn't its original name. And you see a lot of people, rightly so, talking about that at this time of year and just kind of saying it's fine if you want to call it that, but it's not its original Celtic name. Okay. Having said that, the autumn equinox was important and would have been celebrated along with the other harvest festivals. From what I can gather with my research, it wasn't as significant as Lunar and Samhain. Lunar was the start of the harvest, and I think the bulk of getting the harvest in, and really important. The equinox, I think, was a pointer, a marker of, things are really going to start to wane now significantly. But these things would have moved, celebrations would have moved based on when the harvest was ready. And I think we forget that a little bit now with the wheel of the year, because we work with the wheel of the year, but we don't work with the land as much. And so it can be a little bit of a disconnect where we get really fixed on certain dates. must be celebrated on this date. Lunar sun must be the 1st of August. Well, it wouldn't have been. It would have been when the harvest was ready, because the whole point of the Wheel of the Year is that it's working with the land. So I always say to people, look at your land. What is happening? What are your signs of autumn? It's going to be different for us all. I'm really fortunate where I live to be very close to lots of nature, but also lots of farms as well. So when I drive through certain areas of Staffordshire and Shropshire, we drive through a lot of fields and a lot of farms, and you could see when the harvest was being brought in. It was later this year. So, it's really personal to you, to how you relate to these times of year and what is happening on your land. And I think we miss that sometimes. These practices, yeah, we can read about them in books, and yes, we can of course learn about the history, but I also invite you to keep them alive by looking at your own landscape. What is happening, what is present, what is going on, and it will really help you to make your own personal connections to these festivals and what they mean to you. That is the most important thing with our spiritual practice. We need to experience these things for ourselves. This is how I've come to my own conclusions about things. It's not that I'm disregarding certain information, but there's an intuition or a feeling of, with the example of the Persephone story, it just doesn't feel quite right. I don't see her like that. I don't feel like that's correct. And then I research and research and research and find out it's been changed. That's why there's that feeling there. So with anything to do with your spiritual practice, there has to be that sense of your personal relationship, your experience, and balancing that. If we're talking about balance that with reading, with research, with doing your due diligence, but try not to just be reliant on other people telling you what these times of year mean. What does it mean to you? What's special to you? What's sacred to you? What is happening outside of your window? What's happening in your garden? Yes. And in this way, it becomes very significant, very meaningful to you. So the other thing that I wanted to share with you in this episode is just some books that I have either read or I'm currently reading that I wanted to share with you. So this one, so I got this for my birthday, and it's called Daughter of the Moon Goddess by Sue Lynn Tan. Those of you on the podcast, if you're listening on the podcast, the cover of this is just exquisite. Those on YouTube, so you can see. It's a really beautiful looking book. But it's just wonderful. I couldn't put this one down. I was totally immersed in the story. So as the title suggests, the book is about the daughter of Chonga, the moon goddess, and she just goes on this incredible adventure to be reunited with her mom. And it is, yeah, it's just great. There's a bit of romance in there. There's lots of wonderful Chinese mythology. There's dragons, really, really recommend that. And I read it quite quickly because I just couldn't wait to find out what happened. And then the other one that I wanted to share with you that I'm still reading is Wilder Than Midnight. So I've actually borrowed this one from our local library. It's sort of a retelling of lots of different fairy tales. So there's nods to Red Riding Hood and Cinderella and Sleeping Beauty and Rapunzel, but it's done in a really beautifully written way, and it's very poignant as well, particularly for this time of year. I feel like this book really speaks to the witch wound and some of the narrative that went along with why people were persecuted and how that just became an excuse to discriminate against people. yeah, I really recommend it. I think it's young adult fiction, but that's kind of my jam. I love reading those books. And so this is Wilder Than Midnight. This is by Kerry Burnell, or Cherry. I'm not quite sure how you say her name, but oh, and there's wolves in it as well. So the one girl in the story grew up with wolves, so I was very on board with that with that part of the story as well. Um, and that this to me anyway is another big part of autumn into winter. It's a time to really feed your imagination, and that's what we would have done, as things got darker, as the days drew in more. There was more time for fairy tale and magic and imagination, and I think we have lost that a little bit with just how much technology, electricity that we have. We can just keep the day going if we want to, right up until we go to sleep. And that there's a lot of beauty and value, I think, in not every day. It's not going to always be possible, but maybe just thinking, I'm not going to put all the lights on, and maybe just going to have like some candlelight, and I'm really going to let the dark in, not in a negative way, but there's a lot of value and beauty to be found in the dark. And it also will just help us to understand the restful qualities of this time of year as well, if we can connect more with the dark. It's very restorative and very healing. So I think I'm trying to think if there's anything else I wanted to share with you. Oh yeah, so I spoke a little bit about this on Instagram recently, and had loads of comments and loads of responses to this. So I thought I'll mention it in this episode as well. So one of the things that I always try and do with each wheel of the year, but particularly a big shift, so a big seasonal shift like this one into autumn, is to really cleanse my space. So the post that I'd put up on Instagram was just about a witchy house spray that I'd made. So it's a glass bottle, and I filled it with herbs and essential oils, and sort of went around the house kind of cleansing each room, but being really detailed with it. So this was something that we learned in our priestess training with Mother House of the Goddess, which, I mean, there was so much that we learned in that course, but we did a lot about kind of energetic cleansing, energetic protection, but it was to the detail of cleaning your like window frames, window sills, all the kind of entrances and thresholds of your home. And particularly as we're dealing with a lot of funky energy at the moment, I think there's something like 5 or 6 planets in retrograde at the moment. I mentioned that we're going to be moving into eclipse season. We're also moving at the end of October, there we'll be moving into the Samhain portal as well, where the veil thins. So we want to just make sure that we've got a lot of good energetic hygiene. So yeah, just using sacred smoke, using crystals, cleaning, dusting, just refreshing things. And I do that in like a big way at the beginning of a new season, and then I try and kind of keep on top of it at those times where I know there's that intense energy. So as we move into October, there is going to be a shift, lots of energy shifting. So a lot of the planets that have been retrograde are actually going to be stationing direct. And so there's always a feeling of that. And then Mercury, which has been retrograde, is retrograde now, is going to be stationing direct on the 2nd. But then we have its shadow up until the 16th, I believe, of October. Sometimes, from my own experience anyway, the shadow of Mercury retrograde is often worse, for me anyway, than it just being its normal retrograde self. So just be aware of that. There's some intense energies, yeah. And then Mars is going to then go retrograde at the end of October, just in time for the eclipses. So yeah, good energetic protection is really valuable at this time of year. And you can use all of those practices, actually, it's what I've really enjoyed doing, to connect with your enchantress, your witch, or your wizard. You know, however you relate to that kind of magical part of you, to use these practices, yeah, to connect to that magical self. Thinking about your hearth, thinking about the heart and center of your home, thinking about honoring your ancestors and bringing them in for the winter as well, in for the autumn and winter. So yeah, I'll leave you with that, to close out the end of this episode. So I really hope you've enjoyed. I hope those of you on YouTube have found it helpful or nice to have this delivered in a video format as well. I will put the links to some of the things that I mentioned in the notes below. And I will be back to do an episode for Samhain. If you're keen to connect with Samhain ahead of time, I did actually do my first podcast episode was all about Samhain. So if you want to listen to that sooner rather than later, you can listen to last year's. I'm hoping to do some more interviews as well, if time allows. And yeah, a couple of other things to mention. So I have got ready to go is my course, online course, Cersei's Garden. So if you really want to get a little bit more witchy, that I really enjoyed putting that course together. So it's a lot about Cersei herself. There's a really nice meditation to meet her, but it's a lot to do with plant magic and folklore. So we look at the folklore and history of poisonous plants. We look at establishing a moon garden and what that is. We look at healing herbs, and there's some really sweet meditations to connect with the energy of a couple of plants. I think it's lavender, rosemary, and garden sage, if I remember rightly. There is a section on creating your own grimoire, and also a section on dyeing fabric and paper with plants. So all of that being to establish and create a beautiful grimoire. So yeah, I just had a lot of fun putting the course together last year, and it's an evergreen course, so it's self-study. You can do it whenever you want, and it will be available onwards. So I'll put the link for that if you're interested. And then in a very, very similar fashion, my long course for next year, if you like. So those of you that are on my monthly membership, we have been exploring women throughout history in the Lunar Temple, and we're going to start a brand new theme for 2023, which is the Green Witches Year, which again I'm really excited about. So each month we're going to be looking at magic for that month, what the moon is doing, what to do in the garden, what to spot in the hedgerow, spells to do, rituals to do, ceremonies to do. And then I'm making these really beautiful, almost like almanacs or zines, journals, whatever you want to say, for each month as well. We are going to be beginning actually with the winter solstice. So the course will open on the winter solstice in December. And then January, I've just almost finished working on that, and it's full of magic. And January, I think, gets really overlooked. I think that we use up all our magic in December, and then January can feel very flat. Actually, it's an incredibly magical time. We're exploring the Oracle Nights, which are an alternative to the 12 days of Christmas. We're looking at particular goddesses associated with that time of year. There's actually a lot of their kind of holy days in January as well. We're looking at spinning and weaving. Yeah, I'm really excited. So that isn't open to enroll yet because I'm just finishing. So as soon as it is available, I will let you know, because a few people have been messaging me to ask about it. So yeah, that will be hopefully open for enrollment really, really soon. And then the other thing to look out for if you're interested in a more interactive workshop is myself, Marissa, and Kimberly from Mother House of the Goddess are going to be doing another witch retreat. So we're going to be doing a bone witch workshop, bone witch retreat in November, and that's really to kind of work with the death of the year, with the Samhain energy, with the more kind of dark crone goddesses like Baba Yaga and Nick Nevin. So lots more information to come on that as well. So I'm just wishing you all a really beautiful new moon in Libra. I hope you've had a nice equinox and continue to work with those energies. And remember what I always say with the Wheel of the Year as well, if you haven't had the opportunity to do something on the day itself, view them as seasons. So between now and Samhain, how are you going to honor the equinox? You know, so don't feel that you've missed out. Decorate your house, put some beautiful gingerbread candles on, do a card spread, you know, allow that to infuse the rest of this time between the festivals. And we don't need to be in a hurry, and we don't need to be rigid with our spiritual practice. All right, everybody, thank you so much for tuning in, either listening or watching, and I will see you again very, very soon. All right.